We now cross back to our senior politics reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo, who is in Emalahleni in Mpumalanga, where a drive-by visit is currently underway outside the home of the late Minister in the Presidency, Jackson Mthembu.
That's right, Mpo. As you can see, the motorcade has pulled up. It's ferrying the management of the various teams that Mthembu managed, Mpo, and that includes the Presidency, it's the Government Communication and Information Systems. Of course, then it's the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, and I'm looking at Phumla Williams, the spokesperson of GCIS, just carrying flowers in the vehicle right in front of me. And of course, she will be walking to that picture that has been erected of Jackson Mthembu. And we're not sure at this stage whether or not a few words will be spoken, but it seems like it, Mpo, judging from the microphone that's been set up, it seems as though she's saying a few words looking on at Mthembu's picture. I can imagine what is going through her mind right now and what they're feeling. People who've worked closely with Mthembu. We'll also be seeing the management of the Media Development and Diversity Agency, the National Youth Development Agency, Stats SA, and the National Planning Commission. These are all departments that Mthembu managed as the minister in the Presidency. And so we're seeing several cars lined up, and there's Phumla Williams speaking.
Minister Mthembu esibonisa indlela. Sithanda ukuyuza lethuba sibonge kumndeni wakwaMthembu ngayo yonke into abayenzile ukusinikeza uMinister Mthembu ukuthi asebenzele isizwe. Siyama public servant akwa GCIS, akwa Department of Public Performance Monitoring, Statistician General, MDDA, Brand South Africa, National Policy, Planning Policy. Sithanda ukuthi simtshele ukuthi sizongqina ngaleli khawe. Siyamazi ukuthi ubesebenza ngokuzimisela kuyo yonke into bekeyenza esinika direction. uMinister Mthembu ube umuntu ongasibonisi ukuthi wazi konke. uMinister Mthembu ubesinika indawo yokuthi sibeke umbono wokuthi singenze njani ukuthi senze uhulumeni asebenzele abantu base South Africa kangcono. Athi futhi nalapho senze amaphutha akhona asibonise ukuthi kukuphi la siphuthe khona, and sikhona nathi ukuthi sithathe ama mistake abasinikeza wona. I thought that I will also use this opportunity to say we want to express our condolences. I thought I would finish. I would ask some of my colleagues to come and say a few words in English. I thought I was going to succeed, but I'm badly.
You are allowed to come and drop off the flowers as we do the ritual.
Well, Mpo, if I could just come in for a second there. Of course, an emotional Phumla Williams speaking about her now late boss, saying that Mthembu was someone who was a leader, who would correct them when they're making mistakes, and really saying that she thought she was going to be able to continue with her memorializing of Mthembu, but really she can't. She's in a devastating a devastated state right now, and she's asked that maybe other colleagues come and share their memories of Mthembu. There seems to be a book there as well, Mpho, where managers who worked with Mthembu will be able to leave their messages of condolence for the family. Of course, the reason why then this is happening in this way is because of those COVID-19 regulations, and it seems that one by one those managers will be given an opportunity to leave flowers outside the Mthembu home. As you can see, that's Bosani Ngcaweni as well, who has also just left flowers. And he will also be writing in that book of where messages of condolence will be given. It's a tough time, Mpho, for all of us in the communications fraternity, and you can see you just by how Phumla Williams tried to stay strong, but it's a difficult time, and I think it's even more so difficult because of the many deaths that continue to be reported of the COVID-19 pandemic, and some way or the other, one of us has lost a loved one to COVID-19, and so this is why it also makes it quite sad, and the pain is deep when you think about the work that Mthembu did as well for his country, for his organization, the ANC, and in the communication space. And he too also succumbed to the virus, and of course there was a tweet from one of those people on Twitter to ask the minister to say, well, how is it that you got COVID-19 when you've been telling us to wear our masks, you've been telling us to sanitize, wash our hands every 20 minutes? And Mthembu responded to that particular tweet on the day he announced that he's in hospital, that he too is human. And I think what's happening today is a reminder that we are all human. COVID-19 is not here to play, as we've heard over the last couple of hours. Jesse Duarte saying the same thing. We heard the exact same thing from Mthembu's brother, Wisiwe Mthembu, who said that in his last conversation with Umvelase, he said, COVID-19 ayidlali iyabulala. COVID-19 does not play, it kills. And so this is a very harsh reminder, I think, of the effects of COVID-19 and the effects of not keeping to those regulations. And so, as you can see, Mpho, the cars one by one are going to pull up, and you can see each person who lays flowers at the table, which has a picture of Mthembu erected, that each official says a word or two when looking at the bright-faced picture of Mthembu, might I add. That smile that brightened up a room, and it makes you think of that deep laugh we've been hearing about, being spoken about since the news of his passing yesterday was relayed to the nation. Mpho, we know at this stage that there's still going to be many tributes such as this one. We know that tomorrow ANC Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte will also be leading a delegation from the African National Congress to this very home as well tomorrow. And the funeral of the now late Minister in the Presidency, Jackson Mthembu, will be held on Sunday. He will be receiving a special Category 1 funeral, and the national flag will be flown at half-mast at every flag station in the country from tomorrow morning until the evening of the funeral, that is on Sunday. And again, in that statement that communicated that he would receive this funeral, the Presidency remembering him as a man who contributed immensely to the liberation struggle as an anti-apartheid activist, a student leader and unionist, for which he was subjected to harassment and detention by the apartheid security forces. And you know, just on that point of apartheid security forces, Phumla Williams herself suffered immensely during that time. And so she's known Jackson Mthembu even before them working together in governments. They've known each other since the liberation struggle. So for her, this is the fall of a fellow comrade, a brother, someone who was dear to her, and they've been comrades in arms for many, many years.
Ziyanda, as you speak and describe Jackson Mthembu and the response that he made on social media when someone asked him about his COVID-19 status, of course, that reminds us of what people have been saying about him, that he wasn't afraid to speak out and really just bravely say what he needed to say without fear of any sort of discrimination. We also know that ANC Deputy Secretary General Jessie Duarte, who really had tears in her eyes at a briefing, used Mthembu's death to warn the public not to be complacent about COVID-19. Even after Mr. Mthembu had his COVID-19 status being positive, he also continued to urge people to be responsible, sanitize, and follow all those non-pharmaceutical interventions.
Absolutely, Mpo. And I think the fact that Mthembu communicated his COVID-19 status and his health status in terms of him now being hospitalized and why he was hospitalized was also part of how committed he was to communication. And you'll remember, Mpo, that the government has also been trying to ensure that there isn't stigma around the coronavirus and the pandemic that we found ourselves in. And just speaking on this, I'm reminded of the conversation I had with Pastor Linda Zwane this morning. He is from the Sacred Heart Catholic Church here in Emalahleni, and he was sharing how Mthembu called him in December wanting to talk to him. And he says in that conversation, Mthembu was expressing fear and anxiety around the second wave, which we now find ourselves slap bam in the middle of, and saying that he was really anxious and confused about how to deal with this. I mean, this is someone who every time we saw him stand up at the podium, he seemed confident. He seemed to be restoring hope to the nation. But it's quite moving to find out that he was going through his own inhibitions and anxieties about how to deal and manage with the coronavirus, and really showing that humanity that we keep speaking about, the vulnerability of Jackson Mthembu, who wore his heart on his sleeve. He was never afraid to be that vulnerable. And so when hearing that conversation that he got from his spiritual leader in the form of the Roman Catholic Church, it tells a story of how he too has been grappling with what so many of us have been dealing with, Mpo, and really sharing the story of how even the officials who continue to drive by and leave their messages may too be feeling even more anxious that one of the frontline workers, such as Jackson Mthembu, succumbed to COVID-19. And here we are today, laying their flowers in front of his picture, remembering him. And I'm sure they're remembering conversations that he had with them about the COVID-19 pandemic, about the regulations, which we've seen sometimes sparking criticism from the public. And this is surely a sobering moment, Mpo, not only for those in government, but of course the nation. He is the most senior leader to succumb to. Whether or not this may change the messaging and make it, more hard-hitting now that Mthembu, someone who was at the forefront, has now lost his life.
Ziyanda, I know that, as you speak about those who are paying tribute, who are writing their messages, and now, doing funerals in the new normal, I suppose, the new way of conducting matters to save lives, essentially. I know you've been interacting with his family, and, what have they had to say about his passing? I know you had a very close conversation with his brother, who spoke about the greatness of this man.
Mpo, the sense that I'm getting here is that there's a great level of shock from the family And Michael Buisiwe Mthembu was saying that and echoing those sentiments when he was speaking about how they believed that he would pull through because he was such a strong man. But that in and of itself shows you that the coronavirus has no discrimination. It knows no class, it knows no race, it knows no age. And, Buisiwe sharing how Mthembu was a pillar of strength for the family. He was the eldest sibling. And by the way, the striking resemblance of Buisiwe Mthembu and Jackson Mthembu, it's enough to bring tears to your eyes when you realize that this person who is the spitting image of a minister who is now late, a minister that even in the media and the fraternity we worked closely with, is no more. And he was sharing that Buisiwe Mthembu, how they know it's going to be tough going forward. They know that it's not going to be easy for them to come to terms with this, especially because it seemed as though he might have been on the mend, but such as the unpredictability then of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mthembu had tweeted on the 11th of January that he tested positive and ultimately died at the one military hospital yesterday. And so the family, the wife and the children are inside the house, I believe, in Mpo. Really his brother telling us that it's hard, it's a shock. But they are also appreciating the tributes, the messages and the support that's coming from both the government and the ANC.
You also spoke to the acting ANC secretary in Emalahleni, Lindiwe Njali. You know, what did you get out of that? And, you know, in adding to the many contributions and the tributes that we've been hearing throughout the past 2 days?
Well, I can tell you, Mpo, that the tribute paid by Lindiwe Njali, who is a politician who was groomed by Mthembu here in Mpumalanga, is a display of the kind of passion Mthembu had for young people. She will tell you that Mthembu would drive with them in his Passat to meetings. And he was a true volunteer of the ANC, never wanting reward, never wanting the spotlight, but really committed to the ideals of the movement, Mpo. And it's interesting because Lindiwe Njali is someone who's also facing some difficulties here in Mpumalanga. She was recently assaulted at a meeting, a branch meeting to relay the message of the dissolving of branches. And she was saying how Mthembu supported her during that particular time and emphasizing the importance of sticking to your guns when it comes to your principles and values, no matter how uncomfortable or untenable the situation may be. And so it was never about popularity, it was always about the principle. And Lindiwe Njali really sharing her memories from when she was in the ANC Youth League. I mean, now she's an MEC here in Mpumalanga. So these are some of the tributes coming in from people who've interacted with Mthembu very closely, people who've been groomed by Mthembu for a very long period of time. And might I add, I'm looking at one of them in the form of Ngcobo Mhlauli, who is the one speaking in that vehicle. She is the media liaison officer in the office of the presidency, and she too has been in the ANC Youth League structures. And so Mthembu, up until his last moments, he was still passionate about young people. That's just a display of that. And I believe that he was very passionate about bringing young people on board when it comes to governance, and particularly in the government, bringing in new ideas and taking the country forward, and really also, you know, handing over the baton to young people. As we know, that's been a point of contention in the governing party, this intergenerational mix that we've previously heard of, Mpo. And certainly then Mthembu really rising above that, also being remembered as a man who rises above factions within the organization. So this Mpho is just one of many tributes that we're expecting to get from government officials, the governing party. But we've heard as well, Mpho, from those who are not even in the African National Congress. Mthembu's legacy spans across the political spectrum. And there's Lindiwe Ntshali then, and it seems as though there's an official who's going to say a few words. Let's listen in.
Commission yokuplan i-future yekhaya ngokuhamba inkokeli yethu ubaba. Mina engumuntu odala nisebenza kurhulumente, azange ngibe nenkokeli efana nominister, azange ngibe neboss efana neminister. Umuntu bengumuntu, cha umuntu usebenza nabantu njengomuntu. Before abayinto, before akabi minister, umuntu. Sibuhlungu kakhulu ngokuhamba kwakhe. Umuntu bezithobile, umuntu benenhlonipho. So we are saying that the loss of a leader with such unique, such rare qualities is a loss not only to the government, is a loss to the country. So we are really sad, but we are encouraged by the fact that all the good deeds of Jackson will be his legacy, his proud legacy. Nina bahlali bakhe, ama-neighbor bakhe, you should be proud, because inkokeli eyenze izinto ezinhle that we can be proud of. So siyakuqinisa, sikhala nani abakamthembu, sithi lalani ngenceba. You are not alone. The government, all of the government is with you, and the whole nation is with you at this point. Sithi lala ngoxolo, Jackson Mthembu the last. Siyabonga.
Mpho, that was of course another official then paying tribute to Jackson Mthembu. If I could just translate what he was saying, in essence he was relaying how the qualities that Jackson Mthembu possessed were rare, and that losing a leader who has such rare qualities is a loss to the entire nation. And one of the leaders now not getting out of his car, but really leaving a few words, saying a few words to the family from his vehicle. There are some members of the family, including the brother of Mthembu, Michael Boisiwe Mthembu, sitting next to his picture, really nodding and acknowledging what is being said to him. Of course, many messages of condolence coming through, and there are two more vehicles from this particular motorcade left in Mpho. But, an orderly manner that this has been taking place. Some have laid flowers in front of Mthembu's picture to remember him, to honor him, and all round, Mpho, nothing new here. It's actually quite a marvel to realize how everyone is saying the same thing about Mthembu, which shows the level of consistency that Mthembu maintained when interacting with people from all walks of life. No differentiation or distinction that has been made, from those working with him in government, in the media fraternity, from those in this community. They've all said the same thing about how humble Mthembu was, how much he always gave time to them, how he was somebody who would always lend them an ear when wanting to get a solution to a problem that they might be facing. And that's something that his brother really expressed, that he was someone that the family really leaned on for support and was a true pillar of strength for the Mthembu family. And so, Mpho, really one cannot emphasize how much Mthembu is going to be missed by his colleagues, and as you can see, that marks the end then of that particular motorcade that has come from officials in government, coming from the MDDA, the GCIS, including those from the National Youth Development Agency, Mpho. So all-round officials echoing the sentiments that we've heard being expressed even across the political spectrum. And as I've already mentioned, then more tributes like this are likely to be taking place. I'm going to try to move in closer then to show you some of the flowers that have been brought for Mthembu here. And you'll see that picture then for him wearing his golf shirt. And that's Mr. Mthembu's brother, Buyisiwe Mthembu. And of course, a somber moment here. And next to Buyisiwe Mthembu is Lindiwe Njali as well. We spoke to her earlier on this morning. As I've already mentioned, she's someone who's been groomed by Mthembu, and so she's also giving of her time and service to the family, and of course to ensure that the preparations for Mthembu's farewell are well underway. And to my left, Mpho, I'll show you some of the community members who've come out and lined up outside the Mthembu home here in Akkerville in Emalahleni. You can see that the street has been painted in the ANC's colors of green, black and gold, of course representing and remembering the fact that Mthembu was a staunch ANC member, defending the decisions of the organization even through difficult times, even when at times he himself would not agree with the decisions of the African National Congress, but remaining loyal to the movement and to the organization. And that is the kind of man that Jackson Mthembu was. That is the kind of man who has continuously been remembered in this way, Mpho. And so we're certainly expecting to see more activity outside the home, but one wonders how they're going to manage this. Mthembu is someone who was well loved by his community, but we know those COVID-19 regulations, Mpho, they really make it difficult for someone, a giant such as Mthembu, to be remembered.
But of course, the drive-by memorial, so to speak, has been a real good example of the kind of discipline that is being experienced there and shown there, and the seriousness in the fight against COVID-19. The planning there speaks to a man who was disciplined and also respected protocols.
Absolutely, Mpho. I cannot emphasize this enough, and this is what makes this such a tragic irony, that a man who was so strict and disciplined and really was at all times trying to emphasize the message of COVID-19, communicating how to ensure that no one contracts the virus, that he too succumbed to COVID-19. A soldier who died with his boots on, Mpho. That's all we've been hearing throughout. And really, I think for the officials who worked with Mthembu, not to say that they weren't already aware of the severity of the situation, but I think it's brought it much closer to home that someone who one of the strictest people about the COVID-19 pandemic, maintaining all the protocols, he too contracted the virus and ultimately lost his life.
Very well, let's leave it there for now. Senior politics reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo bringing us the very latest outside the home of Minister in the Presidency Jackson Mthembu in Emalahleni. We will continue to bring you updates coming out of there when we